profit has now become a name in our name manager. You'll also notice that these print areas we set up earlier on each of the worksheets also has a name to it. So now let's close that, select SG&A, Alt, M for formulas, N for name manager, new, and now SG&A. You could edit this if you wanted, by the way. You could type in whatever else you want to it and press OK. And close. So now when we're down here and we want to type EBITDA, we can type equals gross. I'm going to start typing gross profit, and you see how it comes up as a suggestion here. Press Tab on a keyboard to accept that suggestion. Minus SG, and now SG&A is coming up. Tab to accept that, and press Enter. We get the same number as we calculated before. We can fill that right with Control R, and if we press F2 on any of those formulas, you see that it's referring to the entire named ranges up above. So the formula always corresponds to the cells in the same column that it's referring to in the range. So that is a way to use named ranges to calculate EBITDA. Now, instead of naming an entire range, let's look at how to name just one specific cell. Let's put here EBITDA sensitivity, and that's going to be equal to EBITDA in any given year times 1 plus, if I scroll up, our sensitivity driver here. But instead of anchoring this in place with F4, as we would have to do here to make this formula, we're going to name the cell and build the formula that way. So if you click on that cell that you want to apply a name to, and you can actually click in the left corner here where it says C36, you can override that, and let's give it the name sensitivity. So now, not an entire range, but just one cell is called sensitivity. You'll see if you move to the right, it's D36. Back to C36, it's now called sensitivity. And then you have B36, so you can see how that works. Now we can build the formula very easily where we take the EBITDA in a period and multiply it by 1 plus. And you can either refer to that cell, and you see that it brings the name into the formula automatically, or you can just start typing it. And you see that it comes up, press Tab to accept it, and close the bracket. Notice that I do not use any anchoring here. By pressing F4, it's not required. I can actually take that and fill it to the right with Control R. I'm just going to copy the formatting from above. Alt H, V, S, and T. And if I press F2 to audit these cells, you'll see that it's always referring to that one cell named sensitivity. And if I go up there and put 10% in, you can see that EBITDA sensitivity is always 10% higher than regular EBITDA. So now we've shown you how to use named ranges and named cells. It's important to point out, though, that there is a downside to naming cells, which is that if someone else is auditing your model and they look at this formula, they don't necessarily know where sensitivity cell is located. Sure, they can press F2, and if it happens to be nearby, they'll see it. But it's much easier for them to understand where a cell C36 on advanced financial analysis is located than just sensitivity. Now let's take a look at how to trace precedents and dependents in a model. This can be a very useful exercise when you want to audit your own model or someone else's work. Here's an example. Let's go to cell E4, where we have 2017 revenue. Let's trace what cells are dependent on this cell. Press Alt, M for formulas, and D for trace dependents. So what you can see then is that based on these arrows, gross profit, the revenue growth rate, the margin, the common size analysis, etc., and 2018 revenue are all dependent on 2017 revenue, which makes perfect sense. Let's remove the arrows. Now let's see how trace precedents works. If we go to net income in 2022 and we use our shortcuts, so we press Alt M and this time P for precedents, we can see that net income is dependent on taxes and EBIT. But I'm going to use my mouse here for a second. If we keep pressing trace precedents, we can see how it goes back, and we can actually keep pressing it until it goes back to the last point where it stops, which is that 2022 net income goes all the way back to being a function of 2017 revenue. And you can see what else it's a function of as well. So this is a very good way of auditing the model. Let's remove the arrows. There's another way to do this as well. If we take the 2018 revenue, and this time we just press Control open square bracket. Control open square bracket traces precedents. So you can see the 2018 revenue is a function of 2017 revenue and the growth rate assumption. Let's look somewhere else at how this works. Let's go to this cell here, E37, and press Control open square bracket on our keyboard. You can see it's a function of 2017 revenue and our assumption here for the sensitivity analysis. Let's click on this cell now, and let's trace the dependent cells on this one, because quite a few cells should be dependent on this. Let's press Alt, M for formulas, and D for dependents. And you can see we get a very bright screen here because this sensitivity cell is linked to everything in this area, which is what we would expect. And let's remove the arrows. So when you're working on either your own model or someone else's model that you've inherited, be sure to use trace precedents and trace dependents to audit and make sure the model's working as expected. Now it's time to talk about how we can audit a model using the goToSpecial function. Imagine that you just inherited this model, and you need to figure out if all of the blue cells are actually hard codes and if all of the black font cells are actually formulas. You'd have to go through and check them one by one if you really wanted to know by pressing F2 on each cell. Is this actually a formula, or is this a hard code? Luckily, there's a way to quickly audit the entire spreadsheet. And what we can do is press Alt, H for home, FD for find, and then S for special. And I'm going to press cancel to show you an even faster way is to just press F5. When you press F5, you then click special, and you can use the goToSpecial function. So we can automatically go to all cells that contain constants, meaning hard codes. And you can include numbers, text, logicals, and errors, or you can, for example, exclude text and just go to the numbers that are hard codes. And then you can also go to all formulas. So let's look first at constants, but let's exclude text because we just want to know which numbers are hard coded. And press OK. Let's look at what we see. We see the blue cell here that we know is a hard code. All of these assumptions are hard codes, and the historical numbers that we thought were hard codes are. And it also points out that cell D1 is actually a hard code, whereas these other years are formulas. So that's perfect. That's very helpful to see. Now let's try it again. Press F5 again and special. And this time let's go to formulas and press OK. So here's what we can see. All of these black font cells are formulas just as expected, and so are these years here. So that's very helpful. That's a very quick way of seeing how the model is set up. Now let's see how we can use conditional formatting to see how a model works. Let's select all of the percentages on the common size income statement. Press Alt, H for the home ribbon, L for format cells, and H for highlight cells rules. And then we want L for less than. So we want to see any cells that are less than 6%. And we want to highlight them with a custom format. So the fill, we could actually say no fill and no border here. But then font color, we could actually make a light gray. So what we're doing is reseeding these numbers. We're saying anything that is below 6% is not that material. So let's make it a light gray color so it fades into the background, as an example. Now let's look at a different way of using conditional formatting. Let's highlight the EBITDA numbers here. And let's press Alt, H, L for conditional formatting, H for highlight cells rules, G for greater than. And let's say if it's greater than 90 million, then we want it to be green. Press OK. Now let's repeat that. Let's press Alt H, L for conditional formatting, H for highlight, and this time L for less than. And we want to say if it's less than 90 million, then we'll make it red with light red. Press OK. So now we can quickly see where the turning point is, where EBITDA becomes greater than 90 million. It's in 2020. So that's a helpful way of flagging information in a model. Let's look at how to incorporate dynamic headings into our model. If we close all the grouped cells by pressing 1, and actually we can select these cells here and actually group them Alt, A for data, G for group, and G again, so that it's nicely grouped there. If we have all these closed, so it's easy to look at, we might want to add a label to the income statement that indicates it's in USD thousands. In order to do that, we can change this from just being text by pressing F2, getting into the cell editor, typing equals, opening quote, and going to the end of income statement, adding a space, and closing the quote, then using an ampersand to join it with whatever is contained in cell A1, so refer to A1, and press enter. So as you can see, it automatically adds whatever is in that cell to the end of the name. So the way it works is that we make a formula. Whatever we want written as text, as permanent text, we put in quotes, including spaces. We have to add the spaces. And then we use ampersand to join whatever is contained in a cell. Let's look at another example here. Let's open up the analysis section. And we can do something even more dynamic. We could say that we want a cell that's equal to EBITDA, join with ampersand, open quote, space, in, space, and close quote. Then an ampersand to refer to the year 2022. So we've now got a formula that's actually connected to these two cells. If I press F2, I see that it's connected to EBITDA and 2022. And I can actually then just refer here to EBITDA in 2022, just so that it makes sense here. We understand why we've got this label. And let's group this Alt A G G, press 1 to collapse everything down, and we've now incorporated some very cool dynamic headers.